Hello. It might actually happen today. We might finish this novel. Well, once again, it's been ages since I've been able to record. So I have long COVID, got some mild pneumonia. It's been just a real treat. I think I'm on the mend, slowly but surely. But this is all to say, wear your masks, get your new boosters, keep doing all the things. It's not over. Um, but right, so I will pick up where we left off. If I do finish, it might be a slightly longer recording, and then maybe I'll be able to make another video in the coming days just to talk a little bit about my feelings about this novel. And I taught it in a graduate seminar in spring of 2022, and my students had lots of interesting thoughts. So that seems to be of interest for people who do watch these videos. There's Trudy. Hi, Trudy. Here she comes. Um, but we'll see if for today we can just finish this novel. All right. Why not? She thought, and began to read the baby Marlon Brando's Wikipedia. To read the baby Marlon Brando's Wikipedia entry. Maybe it was the champagne, but it suddenly struck her as a democratic principle that everyone should get to know about Marlon Brando. How he looked like a wet knife in a t-shirt, the cotton ball in each cheek when he talked, rumors of him wearing diapers on the set of Apocalypse Now. Nothing useful, but one of the fine spendthrift privileges of being alive, wasting a cubic inch of mind and memory on the vital statistics of Marlon Brando. Talk, laugh, carry, lift, the clear flow of animating water. Once she had flown to New York for a photo shoot and had posed against a brick wall at golden hour wearing a large black garbage bag. But when the photographer showed her the pictures on the monitor, she was embarrassed to see that her hands were dead in every shot. The garbage bag she was swathed in had more line, more purpose. She looked like she was disappearing from a Polaroid because her parents had failed to kiss in the past. No one knows what to do with their hands the first time, the photographer had reassured her. But now, the tension in every finger as she maneuvered the baby up the stairs, the cramps she felt in her wrists after supporting the head for an hour. Some people were etched, transparent, lovely in their grief. But whenever she caught a glimpse of her face in the mirror behind the couch, she looked like she was trying to poop after a 3-week course of Vicodin. Her stomach at all times roiled, like the comments section under a story about pillow angels. No vehicle ever invented for the transmission of information, not the portal, not broadcast radio, not the printed word itself, was as quick, complete, or crackling as the blue koosh ball that the baby kept tucked under her chin as she slept, her small mouth open to say, "Oh, my answers." Her other hand she kept twisted in a bright red pom pom, believing it was her mother's hair. Nobody else likes those toys, the hospice nurses told them, interested, for they too were gathering the pinpricks of facts that would be added to the sum total of stars in the sky. It's too much input. Can she meet a dog? She had been asking pathetically, back to the time the baby was born. When will it be okay for her to finally meet a dog? At last, the baby got to meet a dog. It was a little white poodle, and as soon as she was set down on the couch, he began to lick her all over, arms, legs, face, as if she were his long lost owner. He's not allowed to be an official service dog, his trainer explained, because the test is that you have to walk past a bucket of fried chicken and ignore it, and that was never going to happen. The baby squealed and called for more. The dog ate her fingers one by one. Strange how everything in the entire world wanted to do that to a baby. Are you in there? They would ask very quietly when the baby's eyes began to travel and her heart rate climbed. When she turned lavender, blue, that quartzy gray, they all jumped up from the couch and sent their chants to her like cheerleaders. You can do it. Everybody loves you. Come on, stay with us. Keep me alive, her friend who was a disability activist had told her and gestured toward a room of crystalline intervention, machines, tubing, oxygen. Keep me alive till the end, she said, for she did not believe in the vegetable state. You would come visit me and you would read to me, and I would be in there. This belief that the eye persisted, a line of light under a locked door, slim as a chance, an odd, a window, filed away fat, and a little much. The enlightenment went on, pouring itself perpetually into the cup of coffee she drank as she watched the baby in those boiled clear mornings. One day they had the idea to hold a toy piano up to her bare feet, and for the first note she struck, she uttered a sound of wild outrage. that they had been letting her kick against air and nothingness when she could have been kicking against music this whole time. Write everything down, she told her sister. The portal had taught her that just one word could raise it all up again before your eyes, and came across a slip of paper afterward that said, scanning always back and forth, like someone with an endless supply of sight. But she could not breathe. She gained no weight. She began to refuse the steady drip of medicines that they put into her bottle. She told them the truth with her patient look. And so they took her to the hospital, even as they understood the hospital meant the end. What's wrong, honey? One nurse asked, bending over the baby as she opened into one of her rare, high, heart-tugging cries. Everything's wrong with her, another nurse said, almost without thinking. With us, she wanted to shout. Everything wrong with us. Her hair had not been cut in months, and she knew the funeral might be any day, so she took an afternoon off and went to the salon. I saw a meme the other day, her hairstylist said, concentrating hard on the back of her head. It was about how cowlicks are formed, and it showed a cow coming into a kid's room at night and actually licking his hair, and that's how it happens. A tear slipped from her eye in the mirror. She recalled the text thread she had going with her brother, where he just sent her minor variations of the guess I'll die meme, which, to be honest, she had never fully understood. Oh God, did I snip you? Her stylist asked, bending down under a curtain of benevolent hair. No, no, she said, laying her hand on the stylist's arm, feeling that new and unstoppable stream of care pour out of her palm. I was just thinking that you and I have seen very different memes in our lives. The next day was the baby's 6-month birthday. At the last minute, the people surrounding her decided to be a party. A pink cheesecake appeared from nowhere, and a wrapped gift and a cheerful bunch of balloons. The cake sweated silently at the end of the bed while the baby's oxygen plunged, once and then again and again. But perhaps she felt the lift of helium, sensed the sugar. Perhaps the ribbon on the gift slithered and untied with every jerk of her hand. For suddenly, she rallied, her breath rising with the balloons to the top of the air, and then she was awake. She was at the party. Visitors from miles around crowded, steaming with their coats through the doorway, and everyone broke into song for her. It felt like breaking, and she smiled as she had not smiled in days. There was enough cake for everyone, and when they looked through the final smile, they saw a white glint flashing in her lower gums. First tooth to help them eat it. Everyone is here, she told the baby, and then had a sudden brainwave. The dog is here, she told her, putting the limp hand up to her own short, shaggy brown curls, and the baby patted back. I know. Her brother leaning over the hospital bed and singing Sunrise, Sunset in her ear, his voice joking at first, and then seamlessly serious, because she liked it. Of course she liked it. She could not tell the difference between beauty and a joke. Her face was luminous, as if someone had put flesh on the bone of the moon, and her beautiful blue eyes were larger than ever, as if coming to the end of what there was to see. This was called fluid shift, one of those accidental diamonds of hospital language that sometimes shone out from the dust. She thought of lava lamps and swallowing seas and flocks flying south, time-lapse footage of sunsets, ants clamoring over molasses, the sweet spread of information, what had happened long ago on earth and in our mouths to the vowels. She thought of her sister in the creek bed with her body flung over her brother, protecting him from what wanted to swarm, the gold outside that wanted to swarm them till all their in was gone, till they were only the movement and the marching on. Inside the portal, a prisoner was requesting a picture of motion. I've been in solitary for 23 years and 3 days today. It's like living in a still life painting. That's not living, it's existing, being in place. So little moves here. I'd like to see things moving. Perhaps traffic at night, light shining, and the trails from lights whizzing past. Or water flowing from a stream, waterfall, etc., that shows motion. Or snow while it is falling. Anything in motion. Outside the window, the request whirled down, each flake, the first flake of the snow of everything. The day after the birthday party, the hospital room was dark. It smelled of human milk and store-bought cookies and top-of-the-head sweetness. Everyone else had gone out to breakfast, and her sister had fallen into a near unconscious sleep on the couch in the corner. She curled up in the hospital bed next to the baby. She held the little hand and waited for its wilted pink squeeze, like the handshake of a lily. She stroked the heaving back, how hard it was to haul the body through even a single day. and traced the new brown down on the baby's forehead. She leaned over the child and said something. She said, "It is going to be just like your mother." The moment was so pristine and so meaningful that something must be done to alleviate it. So she picked up her phone and began scrolling through Jason Momoa pics, all the while thinking, "Bitch, if this even happens while you were looking at Jason Momoa pics." A nurse turned the baby on her back and shone a strong light into her eyes so that afterward they would always wonder if the light itself had done it, opened an elevator door, and let her on. The oxygen levels on the monitor began to fall, and everyone crowded into the room. "Music," her sister called, and she flapped her hands, frantic. "What do you play? What do you play as someone is dying?" A name flashed into her mind, perhaps because she saw the cracked cassette on the floor, case on the floor of her mother's van, perhaps because those Pure Moods commercials were stamped on her memory along with the imagery of ocean waves, perhaps because she had recently read a think piece about her unexpected critical resurgence. The name that flashed into her mind was Enya. 6 months and 1 day old. Everything contained in that extra day, that overflow. It was not frightening. Nothing was frightening. The nurses lifted her up so her parents could hold her again. Her head tilted back and her mouth opened as if to drink. Her lips turned the gentle color of fingertips in winter. All of them gathered around her and poured out spontaneous speeches as they gripped her hands, feet, ankles. What they repeated, oddly enough, and over, was that she had done a good job. The nurses gave her morphine and Ativan through a port in her pink heel, like mythology, as if she were immortal in every other part of her. "Hick, hick, hick," the baby said. The faint voltage of "I am" ran and kept running as long as it could. "Such a good job," they all said till the end. It was like nothing any of them had ever seen. There was nothing trivial left in the room, not the clearing of a throat, not an itch on the arch of a foot, except that phone on the pillow, which had malfunctioned somehow to keep playing "Sail Away, Sail Away, Sail Away." Her mother and father cut the top 2 locks of hair off her head, the ones that curled mischievously to either side, like that gif of the Grinch. Their mother changed the baby's diaper, and there was present in her hands 1,000 diaper changes leading up to the perfection of one. The priest had come earlier, with the whole mass packed into a little suitcase that was branded Rome Essentials. But this was the act that broke into the temple and drank up the holy wine. This was the gesture that entered into gold. Every joke she had ever told about diapers vanished up into the air like an incense. 2 nurses gave her a sponge bath, crooning to her as if she were still alive. "You're so good," the nurses said. "You're being so good, sweetheart. Now just turn over and we'll get your back." Finally, they each slid a hand under her neck and lifted, and there she was, her knowledge finally unheavy, staring straight up at the ceiling for the first time. "Holding up her head," they all exclaimed, "sleeping like other people." She sang into the cup of the baby's ear as she was being washed, for her hearing hung perceptibly above them, like a big bronze bell now rocked to a stop. Strange, but she couldn't seem to remember anything but the most universal choruses: jukebox hits, stadium anthems, songs where the radio rested after scanning past the shouting evangelists, where the whole family lifted up together and let whatever the human voice was just fly. The baby did not ever lose her warmth as long as she was in that room. Their father would carry her down to the morgue himself, breaking all the rules, insisting, "Let me," with the blanket so she would not be cold, and his own pearl gray rosary wrapped around her wrist. An hour went missing while she wandered the halls with the family's belongings piled on a hotel cart. And then one of the nurses who had given the baby a sponge bath was holding her next to the hospital entrance, saying the words, "You're singing," into her ear. She concentrated on a patch of empty air behind the nurse's shoulder, for she knew if she turned her head even 1 degree, she would see herself on the phone in the smoking section, holding a cup of coffee and being interviewed about the concrete goose, which was wearing black today. The end of the Wikipedia entry, always the most suspect. But listen, this time it was true. The light on the drive home was like the hide of a breathing animal, silver and gold hillsides of it, fawn and rabbit and fox quivering in a blue snow. It allowed her to approach even though she was human. For once it was not afraid. Under the echoing dome, she kept hearing the disembodied cry. "But she's not gone, is she? She can't be gone." Then the nameless birds were caught and lifted until they were just the light on their undersides. At the cloisters, she remembered, pressing her flaming cheek against the window, thinking of the rosary wound round the little wrist. One of the wooden statues was alive. The forehead leaped out of itself and into the real world. It bulged with one ripe thought, which was the resurrection of the body. It was Jesus, and perhaps he had really been raised, for the sign that was nailed up next to him said, "The fingers on his right hand have been restored." Like, hey, more legs. They did not, in the immediate aftermath, holding heaps of downy garments on their laps, wish for a cure. They wished for a better way to preserve a human smell. She and her mother and sister tore through the house like gray calligraphic hounds on a scent. And when they found a onesie or pair of socks or a little tutu that was marked with that glowing signature, they waved it in the air and said, "Here." She put on a t-shirt that was stained with the baby's eye drops and tucked the koosh ball under her pillow. She set her 24-hour NICU badge on the nightstand and told herself that if the volcano erupted at midnight, it would find her with all the right things surrounding her. So bring on the black ash, she said, and slept. At the funeral home, as the family sat down for a meeting with the funeral director, her brother fucked up and somehow introduced himself as the baby's husband. Their laughter approached hysteria. Tears streaked down their faces. They gripped each other's arms and could not stop. She closed her eyes against her brother's shoulder and saw him carrying the baby into the woods, where his green skills waited to keep them all safe. That one, her sister told the undertaker, and pointed to a casket sunk deep with pillowy satin, an open valentine that even in the picture seemed to lower itself perpetually into a white ground. Something of her old voice returned to her here, the one that stamped her born in 1987 and that had seemed so in danger of disappearing. That one right there, because she's classy. After the meeting, she wandered through what looked like a gift shop, full of brass urns and memorial collages, pocket watches and Swarovski roses, granite slabs sandblasted with the faces of bygone Lindas. She lingered there for a considerable time, picking up paperweights and setting them down, for she only ever liked to travel when she got a souvenir. "Did you know you can get your ashes put into a golf ball?" she texted a friend. "Did you know that your casket can be camouflage? Did you know they can put you in a paper mache turtle and release you into the sea?" It me. "Man, it's a hot one." Started to flicker out of the radio as they were driving home, and her father and brother-in-law began, in sweet fraternity, to extol the virtues of Carlos Santana's guitar playing, which they could only describe as being out of this world. My Mona Quita, my Spanish Harlem Mona Lisa. A dead reflex kicked in her throat. Had she ever found that funny? Or had the laughter waited, external, for her to give in and join it? At the nail salon, the technician introduced himself as Google, "Because I know everything," he said. He smiled against a blinding wall of every imaginable color, a hand with 1,000 fingertips, heaven, and asked if they were going to a party. She whispered to him the truth, and Google crossed himself. Now he knew one more thing. "I'll do glow in the dark, okay?" he said, and began buffing the nails with infinite gentleness. "Go into the dark later, and you'll see them, every one." The men's warehouse where the boys were measured for their suits was holy. The TJ Maxx where the girls texted each other pictures from their respective dressing rooms was holy. The shoe carnival where they staggered up and down the aisles almost laughing. The Michaels where they chose poster boards for collages. The florist where they pointed at baby's breath. The bakery where they deliberated over tea cookies. The Clinique counter where they bought waterproof mascara. The cheesecake factory where they ate bang bang shrimp after it all and were very kind, very, very kind to each other was holy. And the light fixtures she always made fun of seemed to bloom the whole time on their stems. The dog who had met and kissed the baby came to the nighttime visitation and laughed at the long line of mourners as they blew through the door. "Animals are allowed?" she asked the funeral director. "Animals are allowed," he said, and told her that once a horse had come and was led up the aisle so he could nuzzle his owner for the last time, seeking among her face for sugar cubes, breathing the just cut hay of her hair, still feeling in his body the red hot yes that jumped to her smallest commands. But "let me go" was now the order, and what the body said was no. The dog was lowered to the baby in her casket and greeted her with visible recognition. Everyone wept at this, for she was still as a peach in a painting. and she wore an opaque mask of makeup and was no longer warm. Her eyes had been glued shut, and her hands no longer commanded the air, and her squeal had been returned to sound itself. So, what was it about her that he recognized? What was it about her that the little dog still loved? Yet he did. He scrambled among the Valentine satin and tried to wash her face back to what he knew. I am I because my little dog knows me. Who said that? She swore she had seen it somewhere in the portal, painted on a piece of plywood and hanging in someone's house. As the wake murmured on around her, she climbed up bodily on the banister that separated the dead from the living and sat there, letting the line multiply behind her, leaning close to the child's ear to tell her, goodbye, I am I, because my little dog knows me. The neurologist showed up toward the end, and she found herself asking why she had gone into that green, growing field, why she had chosen to study the human brain in the first place. The choice glowed with greater meaning, as the star-like tracheotomy scar on the front of the respiratory therapist had glowed. That's a very long story that I'll tell you someday. The woman smiled so that she saw her standing barefoot in the branches of her own family tree, white asterisks on the shoulders of her black wool coat. To be a member of a generation meant that her sister put on a hot pink dress for the funeral, chose lipstick and towering high heels to match, all the while yelling, we gotta look good for our baby. To be a member of a generation meant that the casket was pink too, a new shade of pink just recently named, that someone snuck a bright, clear amethyst into before it was closed, that the hour she was buried was dark inside the day, and rain fell in its great gray population, that the whole family gathered outside, which still existed, and stood under an evergreen tree, that trap music was played at the wake, that afterward they ate barbecue, that her brother slapped his chest and told his sister, girl, she was a real one. So specificity was present as a living thing, a guest. At the wake, she and her sister held someone else's newborn, and the little bundle was so light and uncomplicated that they kept resisting an urge to toss her up to the ceiling and catch her, for they knew she would always return to them. She's like another species, her sister said softly, young and lovely in her hot pink dress, her arms weighed down by hardly more than a feather. They came home, and her brother-in-law knelt down and kissed it, the square of the couch where she had lived, where she had lain among machines, where they had discovered, almost too late, that they could play patty cake with her. The couche ball was accidentally thrown away, and little did the landfill know what was coming, the blue bursting star of everything she knew, never smaller by one ray. There began a period where she cried uncontrollably in cafes, taxis, grocery stores, bars, at commercials, at documentaries, at Ryan Reynolds movies, in public bathrooms, with her head on her knees, making animal noises that could not belong to her. When the FedEx woman called her sweetheart, when her sister said, you were her mother too, in the portal where the entirety of human experience seemed to be represented, and never the shining difference of that face, those eyes, that hair. Would it change her? Back in her childhood, she used to have holy feelings, knife-like flashes that laid the earth open like a blue watermelon. When the sun came down to her like an elevator, she was sure she could step inside and be lifted up, up, past all bad luck, past every skipped 13th floor in every building human beings had ever built. She would have these holy days and walk home from school and think, after this, I will be able to be nice to my mother, but she never ever was. After this, I will be able to talk only about what matters, life and death and what comes after. But she still went on about the weather. Night after night afterward, with her fingernails glowing in the dark, she dreamed that the baby was still doing a kind of tiny breathing that they had somehow overlooked. Someone always yelled, hey, and the funeral was called off right in the middle. They lifted her from her casket and kissed her. They pelted pink carnations out the window of the car as they drove home. It had all been a mistake. They had only had to notice something smaller than before. The doors of bland suburban houses now looked possible, outlined, pulsing, for behind any one of them could be hidden a bright and private glory. The woman who had once been called the voice of God, who had been absent from the stage for 2 decades, went on singing in her own home. Her partner heard her. He felt sorry for the rest of the world, he said. I just had a lot of something. What was it? The singer had once told an interviewer. So much sun, I suppose, running through me. All this wonderful sun. The doors of suburban houses might be shut up on that sun. The doctors had asked for the brain, with so much hope that it was almost tender, as if they loved her too. Do you think she would mind? Her sister had asked, and she pressed the heels of her hands against her eyes and saw a rocket shoot across that internal black dome. No, I don't think she would mind at all, she had responded. And now that the act was accomplished, it gave comfort. As long as people were looking at that mind, it was still active in the world, asking and answering, finding out about things, making small, dear cries of discovery. It had, the doctors confirmed, only ever kept growing while she was alive. Keep reading a little longer, not totally against your will. My battery is low and it is getting dark, the Mars rover said in the portal. The film waited for her to watch it, glowing black and white at the center of her collection. One afternoon, when her husband was away, she put it on and saw Anthony Hopkins' face shining in the dark as he beholds the Elephant Man for the first time, all beauty breaking in on him, his left eye askew like a dried violet. What she had not expected to feel was simple happiness. But as she looked at the layers of makeup and the bulbous prosthetics, as if her extraordinary companion were back with her again, and the room brimful of her breathing. When the Elephant Man finally speaks, it is like her dreams of the baby. He opens his mouth and the Bible comes out, Shakespeare, Milton, the poets. The doctors burst in on him just as he finishes the psalm. All the days of my life, he says, standing tall, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Where was that house? Where did we go on in the long word dwell? In the portal, a call for Joseph Merrick's bones to finally be laid to rest, though his family had given him wholly to science. In the portal, a picture of Joseph Merrick's skull, where on the right side the bone grew fractally, like cave or crystal or ivy, hand over hand and almost flowing. It did not look strange. It looked, when all was said and done, like what a skull wanted to do. The minor physical adjustments she had once habitually made, lifting her breasts toward her collarbone whenever she looked in the bathroom mirror, snipping the ends off stray curls whenever she went to parties, had flown from her, had perhaps gone wherever the baby had gone. She now took perverse pleasure in the fact that the last time she had looked nice was on the leather couch at that Disney World hotel, basking in a clarified light, every laugh line visible, cradling the darling's head between two breasts that felt like clouds, and sun running through her, sun, wonderful sun. I would have done it for 1,000,000 years, her sister said, toneless. I would have gotten up every morning and given her 13 medicines. There is no relief. I would have done it for all time. Then she told of a bill she had received for $61,000, then sent a picture of a vial of snow a nurse had gathered from that night, clear, liquid asterisks, her snow. Her sister's husband went to a garage sale one afternoon and purchased like 50 Beanie Babies. This, too, was one of the remedies for grief. Someone had sat them on little stools in their display cases so they would not get tired. Of what? Of the long, direct daylight of being Beanie Babies. Someone had cared for them. Perhaps everyone was a god with their eye on some small sparrow. Perhaps everyone was the collector of some soft, rare commemorative, stitched with a visible heart and worth millions on millions in the mind. Related searches. I miss my son who died. I miss my son so much, quotes. I miss my son in heaven. My son died and I miss him. Missing my son sayings. At a meeting to discuss the autopsy results, the doctor took a bite of bagel and shaped his mouth with the great word, why. When Jesus met the blind man, his disciples asked him why. Was it the man's sin? Was it the sin of his parents? And Jesus said it was no one's sin, that it happened so that God might move us forward through and with and in that man. Tears stood without falling in the doctor's blue eyes. That is the medicine, she thought. If I can do anything, he said chokingly, with a slight amount of cream cheese in his mustache, which increased her love for the human race, which moved her forward through, with, in him, which was also for the glory of mankind. Why was she able to do what she could do? They asked the doctors. How could she breathe on her own, breastfeed, answer when we talked to her? The doctors did not know. They spoke of the brain's enormous plasticity. Yes, she felt that. She held it in her hand. She remembered pressing warm silly putty against newspaper until it picked up a whole paragraph of what was happening, clear enough to read, then folding and folding it to blankness again. Can ghosts learn new technology? Her sister asked, thinking of what must come next, the endless conveyor of progress to which a whole human history's worth of spirits must adapt. The two of them were silent for a minute. And then images came crowding in, an elevator ghost pressing every button, feeling its stomach drop out through the bottom of the world, a ghost unzipping its message across long black telegraph wires, ghosts in the portal reading forever, tenderly holding down their hearts. In the group text where they sent her videos back and forth late at night, that's what they said. Thank God, can you believe that we had the technology? What if that teenage boy had put her in the portal? It was hard to imagine a time when that would have made her angry. She would be so grateful now to have people meet the baby in the broad electric stream of things, to know a picture of her, blurred in motion. Was living its own life far from actual fate in the place where images dwelled and dwelled? Our grass looks great, her sister said, sending a picture of the rampantly growing grave, the green, real park they had walked through day by day while she was with them. For there are people in this life we are assigned to watch over. Her sister snipped blades of it and mailed them to her, to carry with her on her travels. She saw a wild, undomestic blanket of it growing in profusion over abandoned suburbs and cities, over the places where we all used to live. Surrounding the meticulous documentation of the baby's final days in her photo roll were a picture of Ray Liotta's recent plastic surgery, a screenshot of a news story about how fake nudes of a congresswoman had been debunked by foot fetishists, a blonde Fox News anchor with a graphic next to her reading, "The hat that dare not show its brim," a fluffy eagle with black wings and filmy gray eyes that, as her friends had spent one marvelous free field day pointing out, looked like it knew the exact hour when you would die. And minutes before it happened, herself, bent over in the darkness of that hospital room and wearing sailor stripes. It would show up on her screen in another year, the announcement that she had a new memory. Scanning back and forth, an endless supply of sight. Gradually, the world called her back. As her plane dragged its dotted line across the Atlantic, she looked out the window again and saw the same glory following her, a round blaze of rain that never blinked. Her eyes floated 2 inches in front of her and seemed to be raining too. The book she had brought, with its soft, focused woman on the cover, lay untouched on her lap. She began to flip through the pictures again. The baby smiling, laughing at a pumpkin patch, in a bathing suit being dipped in the ocean. The pictures were always with her. She could not feel her first fingertip. Once she had visited a little island with shocking white beaches and had worked her bare toes into its famous sand, which was used to make the glass for all our screens. There, the sky was so crystal, the sun so hot, and the air on her skin so unmediated, and the trees so full of koala bears, that she felt either like she had gotten inside the phone completely or else had gotten out. Piles of discarded devices in landfills, with somewhere among them a koosh ball still flickering, trying to transmit. Do you copy? Do you copy? Do you read? Do you read? I copy, she said to the vibrating ear. I copy, I read. She had been asked to give a lecture at the British Museum. The lecture was about the portal, and as she stood at the podium and clicked through the PowerPoint, she tried to pretend that she still lived there, that still she pumped with the blood that she knew. She said the words communal mind and saw the room her family had sat in together, looking at that singular gray brain on an MRI. She thought about the 24-hour NICU badge in her coat pocket that she kept there to remind herself that she had once been a citizen of necessity. Why had she entered in the portal in the first place? Because she wanted to be a creature of pure call and response. She wanted to delight and be delighted. She read, her ribcage shaking, with the voice she had used to delight the baby. Her heart hammered nearly out of her, and she read, quote, she was asked to give a lecture at the British Museum. This was hardly deserved. She had, in a sense, stolen her way there, bit by bit, scroll by scroll, gold piece by gold piece. Still, she stood there and locked them in her mind for an hour. Her face was the fresh imprint of her age. She spoke the words that were there for her to speak. She wore the only kind of shirt available at that time. It was not possible to see where she had gone wrong, where she would go wrong. She said, Garfield is a body positivity icon. She said, Abraham Lincoln is daddy. She said, the eels in London are on cocaine. It was fitting to finally appear in that place and exhibit herself, and from far away, collaged together in body and mind, monstrous in the eyes of the future, an imbecile before the Rosetta Stone, disturber of the deadest tombs, butterfly catcher and butterfly killer, soon to be folded between 2 pages herself, and speak about the liftedness of little and large things. End quote. The audience was silent, and the faces in the front row were shining. This did not feel like real life exactly, but nowadays, what did? What she was imagining was carrying the baby through the museum, the head in her arms on heavy. She was showing her the mummies, setting her lightly down on the steps of the temple, calling her name to the echoing ceiling, carrying her through the Greek marbles, and saying, "Someone in some future time will think of us." She was cracking open the glass case of amulets and hanging every limb of her with protection, protection. She was standing in the hall of the Assyrian lions and assuring her that we would not be devoured. She was carrying her, stopping at every fountain and letting her drink, from prehistory to the modern age, to the moment of them standing there together, marveling. More and more, I begin to feel that the whole world is conscious. Afterward, and after many drinks, people from the audience led her down winding side streets to a club with no name. The club was a crush, one body, a mirror at the back that she first thought was another room until she saw her own face at the center of it. Sign on the wall that said Oasis. At first, she could not dance at all, and then she could not stop. The songs they played were preposterous, were her personal American embarrassments, the ones that had marked her as backward, provincial, unsubtle as a major chord. They played rock and roll all night. They played Seven Nation Army. They thumped up and down like Ohioans to Sweet Caroline. Oh, she said to herself, I did not know. The songs all along had been beloved. The whole club pressed against her, and she thought of little Touch. Her eyes traveled to all the places she was kissed, places all over the world. She wondered, was it worth it to show up, hear a little music, and then leave? Someone at some point slid her phone out of her pocket, and she lifted off her feet, lighter. Her whole self was on it, if anyone wanted. Someone would try to unlock it later and see the picture of the baby opening her mouth, about to speak, about to say anything. And that's the end. Gosh, I find sections of that quite moving. And, quite funny all the way through to the end, even though it's also heartbreaking. So I'm going to try my best to come back for a short little debrief conversation about this novel before too long. But really, thank you for tuning in and sticking with me so patiently all the way through the end. I'm not even going to mention how long it took to make it this far, but I hope you liked the novel and found it interesting. And hope you continue to do well.